Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Good Dram Show for 2016. Right, just like to say Happy New Year to everyone and hope you had some good drams over the festive period, and if you popped into the shop I'm hoping you picked up something nice, and I know I spoke to a few of you that did indeed come into the shop. But anyway, what we're going to do today? Well, I thought first episode of the new year, let's go back to the A to Z of Scottish distilleries. As you know, we've reached the letter I, so I could have done Inchgower, could have done Inverleven, if I wanted to be a bit off the beaten track, but no, I thought let's do another grain distillery. Well, probably the only one. I think it's Invergordon. I think I've done Invergordon before. I don't think I've done any of the other ones, but I forget now. But I did one ages ago. But as you know, I love the grain whiskies, and what I love about them is getting people to try them, to sort of break perceptions. I mean, as we all know, grain distilleries are not cute little brick built distilleries with flower beds and all that kind of stuff. They're whopping great huge industrial plants, and this is where the misnomer has come from. It's seen as an industrial product, it goes into the cheap blends, yada yada yada, but as we all know, it sits in a cask quite merrily for up to 50 odd years because of obviously the high ABV. And as we know, it needs time. It needs at least 20 odd years in a cask before it's picked up enough wood notes to have developed some character and some interest. So we're going to be looking at a range of bottlings from 20s upwards. So anyway, I probably gave you a load of waffle about the distillery, but we'll do a brief recap. It's situated in the Highlands, 3 miles east of Dalmore, and was established in 1959 by the Invergordon Distillers Limited. They opened the distillery with 1 Kofi still, added another 2 in 1963 and a 4th in 1978. Now, as I said, these are huge plants, and Invergordon is a pretty damn big one. I mean, it's got a capacity of about 40 million litres of alcohol per year. Now, to put that into context, if they were to fill all that alcohol into American oak hoggies, you're looking at over 177,000 casks a year. I mean, that is huge, and it goes to show that why there is so much old grain from distilleries that have closed, long since closed, still knocking about on the market, because if they're all producing somewhere in the region of that kind of level of alcohol, then it's going to be a number of years before all these casks are finally used up. But anyway, obviously not all of it's stored on site. I would imagine someone's probably shipped off to various other places, contracts, all that kind of stuff, and that's basically what the grain distilleries were all about. Contract distilling for other companies for their blends, and very few of them actually release any whiskey themselves. I do believe, however, though, that the Invergordon, or the current owners, White and Mackay, do release a 10-year-old bottling as a distillery bottling. But anyway, so coming back to it, the history of the distillery, that is, a number of the grain distilleries decided to build within their complex a malt distillery, and Invergordon was no different to the others in that it built the Ben Wyvers distillery in 1965 and dismantled it in 1977. Incidentally, the stills were eventually ended up in Glengyle in 2003, and that's another great thing about the whisky the industry. Everything tends to be recycled, assuming it can be. But anyway, coming back to the history of the distillery, there was a management buyout, I believe, in 1988, and eventually it was purchased by White and Mackay in 1993, and is still in their safe hands. So. Interesting to note that the original owners, the Invergordon Distillers Limited, were quite a progressive company, and not only did they build the grain plant, they also built 5 other distilleries, including Tamnavoulin in 1966, Bruichladdich in 1968, Tullibardine in 1971, and in 1985 they built Glenallachie and Jura. So brief history there. So let's move on and take a look at this afternoon's lineup then. Okay, so as I said, we will start off with a relatively young 21-year-old. Now, how many times you get called 21 gets called young. Anyway, this is bottling by Hunter Laing in their Sovereign grain range. It was distilled in February of 1992, bottled in November of 2013, cask reference HL10155, bottled at 60.4%. Now, I did want to include this year's bottling. There hadn't been very many bottlings of Invergordon that I've come across this year. I think it was just a 30-year-old, but when I got the sample, it was all a bit murky and it wouldn't have done it any justice. So all these are older releases. The second bottling we'll be looking at is by A.D Rattray. It is a 25-year-old, distilled in 1988, bottled in 2014 at 52.8%, cask number 8093. Third one we'll be looking at, again, is another 25-year-old, another Hunter Laing bottling in their Sovereign range. This is, desperately trying to find the information, again distilled in August of 1988, bottled in March of this year. Oh, I was wrong. I have got one of this year's releases. It was actually a replacement for another one, but we won't go into that. This is cask HL 10699, bottled at 58.1%. Then we will move on to the first of the Douglas Laing Clan Denny bottlings. This is a 26-year-old, bottled at 50.6%, distilled again in 1988 and bottled in March of 2014. Cask reference DH10250. Second in the Clan Denny range is this particular baby, bottled at 44.2%. So now, once we're getting over 30 years old, now the ABV starts to sort of slide off into, lesser levels, should we say. This is a bottle of 44.2, was distilled in December of 1965, bottled in December of 2012 at the ripe old age of 46. And finally, the last one we'll be looking at, again in the Hunter Laing Sovereign range, was distilled in 1964, quite old, bottled in July of 2013 at 43.7%, 48 years old, and the cask reference was HL9861. So I think you'll hopefully agree, quite an interesting range to taste this afternoon. So let's kick off with the young'un then, shall we?
The past has now to flee my mind.
Okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this end. As expected, it's young, it's herbal, it's crisp, it's fresh. There's a perfumed white fruits. There's a beginning of the gentle oxidation character, the dried fruits. Sometimes they go rummy, sometimes cognac-y. This at the moment is kind of neither here nor there, shall we say. It's starting just about to develop it. It's got a lovely sweetness. I mean, I don't know where that sweetness is coming from. I don't think it's entirely coming from the oak. I mean, obviously some will, but I'm not getting a huge amount of oak character. It's all very crisp, clean, and that's the lovely thing about grain. At this kind of age, it has that crispness, that freshness, which kind of livens up a blend. Now I'm getting a bit of coconut. Yeah, toasted coconut, a little bit of white chocolate. So for a young grain, this is actually really quite complex. Absolutely gorgeous, lovely sweetness to it. I think some might not actually like too much of the sweetness, but I think it's got a really nice balance. You can get the sweetness and the crispness. And it's really nice. Palate. feel the alcohol on the finish. It's crisp, it's fresh. I mean, you get the grain up front. I won't say hollow. There's a bit of a pause, shall we say, and then you get the oak. I mean, that's obviously partially down to the alcohol being a little bit masking, but so you get the crisp white fruits, the graininess, a little bit of dried fruit, and then coconutty oak, sweet, a little bit of white chocolate again. Just really nice and all round pleasant, not particularly complex. You wouldn't expect it at 21. Like I said, anything less than 21, you're not getting very much at all. And this is right at the beginning of its kind of aging process in real terms. And so, yeah, it's a nice one to sort of look at, to sort of say, this is what grain whisky is all about. So, yeah, lovely starter, I think. Okay, so let's see what an extra 4 years will do to it then. A little bit heavier, a little bit oilier, but still quite fresh, crisp. Again, a lovely sweetness, and this is obviously a characteristic of, I would imagine, of Invergordon. I mean, some of the other grains like Dumbarton, Carsbridge certainly tend to be more weightier, oilier, heavier spirits. Girvan, for example, is right at the opposite end of the spectrum. It's very light, very high toned. And to a certain, so Invergordon is moving back slightly. I mean, I remember tasting a number of old Duncan Taylor bottlings from a few years back, and they were huge oak monsters. But again, we're talking very subtle oak here. Again, sweetness, crispness, touch of dried fruit, very similar to the first bottling in actual fact. But it's got a lovely spicy finish, lovely balance to it, quite mouth-watering. A little bit more oak on the palate, I'm getting a little bit more toffee. Again, there's some coconut, some sweetness, a touch of dried fruits, white fruit. Yeah, that's really, really lingering. And now it's starting to develop a little bit, and certainly on the palate there is a little bit more of the oxidised fruit. But we're still not quite there yet, we're still only just barely out of nappies, so to speak. So let's move on to the next one. Now, I mean, the thing, like I said, as we know with grain whiskies, they pick up the cask notes. Now, the colour of that one, I mean, this is another 25-year-old, but this has obviously been aged in a lot more active casks. Compared to the first two, which were very, very pale, you would look at that and you'd think, "Oh, I'm going to get a lot of oak." So let's have a look, see if we do. Yeah, ish. It's not mountainous oak. Again, the oak actually is fairly subtle. It's oilier. It's more dried fruits, weighty, big dried fruits. It's more in the sort of, like I say, the Dumbarton, Carsbridgey kind of characteristic, heavier, oilier spirit. Herbal. It's possible that could have been a sherry butt, possibly. I don't think it was. Maybe I should have checked. Oh well. It certainly has a slight herbal kind of character, and that would then ascertain why it's such a dark character. Not quite so grainy. There is a little bit of graininess, a little bit of nuttiness, touch of dried fruits, peanut, raisin, a little bit of treacle. Again, it's got a quite herbal character. It's almost rye-like, really leafy, almost verging on the mentholated. Palate. weighty, big, juicy. Pretty certain this has got to have been aged in a sherry cask. It's got sherry dried fruits, but again, a little bit of graininess, a little bit of oxidised fruit coming through, balancing it really, really nicely. The finish is a little bit dry, a little bit tannic, a little bit chocolatey, more dark chocolate. As tannins grippy, really quite grippy. It's obviously the combination of tannins and alcohol is kind of gripping it quite intensely. But again, no, it's nice. It's not as long as you might expect it to be, but like I said, that's a combination of the alcohol and the tannins. But still, you know, a very, very enjoyable whisky. Okay, so let's take a look at the next bottling, the 26-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us. It's a little bit muted, a little bit oilier. More dried fruits are coming through, sort of sultanery kind of dried citrus. I'm almost getting a little bit of kind of shredded wheat as well. Cereal. Biscuity, toasty, almost like it's been sort of finished in Madeira to a certain extent, although I'm pretty certain this hasn't. Again, it feels quite weighty. It's really deep. I mean, seriously, seriously deep. Not mega complex. I mean, I think the thing is that sort of, although mid-20s can be a really nice time for grain whiskies, I think it certainly appears from a number of tastings. You have the younger grain whiskies at your 20s, and they have the vibrancy and the graininess, and some of the sort of mid-20s to 30s can be a bit in between, and then you get the older ones, which hopefully we'll come on to next, and they got all this wonderful old oak and dried fruit, and sometimes they can be awkward's the wrong word. I suppose you could probably say neither here nor there, I suppose, but this is quite oily, quite weighty, not so sweet. Like I said, really quite biscuity and all that kind of cereal notes going on, which is quite interesting, certainly at this age. Palate. That's more like it. Plenty of toffeed oak, but not sort of overly sweet toffeed. Again, the thing with the grain whiskies, the inherent graininess and crispness of the spirit, I often find really balances up big oak quite nicely. And this is again another reason why they can spend so much time in the cask, because the inherent nature of the spirit just naturally balances up, you know, the toffee, the vanilla, the coconut, all that kind of stuff that tends to go on. But it's a bit oily, it's a bit, I won't quite say short, medium length, not as long as some grain whiskies that I've tasted. Maybe there is a little bit more dampening oak. Maybe this is one of those whiskies that's gone through a bit of a funny phase. Maybe this should have been left a little bit longer to kind of come out the other end. Who knows? It's not bad. It's, yeah, still quite pleasant. Right, okay, it would have been nice to have had a 30-odd-year-old to kind of slot in at this kind of point to say, well, here we go, this is what, but we're now jumping to 46, so anyway, well, let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Oh yes, that's big and bourbony. I wouldn't be surprised if this was emptied into a first fill bourbon cask. It has that big bourbony character, dark molassy-ish, treacly-ish kind of fruit. Big chunky vanillins, a little bit of herbal notes, almost rye. Really spicy. It's got some tight tannin spices. A little bit of graininess coming through, but this is certainly an oak. Well, yeah, it's an oak monster, but it's not a one-dimensional oak monster. Yes, there's lots of vanilla, some oiliness, but it's just got vibrancy still, you know. A little bit of lemon coming out now, oily kind of lemon, sort of pastel kind of things. But that oak is absolutely gorgeous, really sweet, nutty, bourbony, big. All right, I'll taste it now, shall we? Oh, that's earthy, intense, dark chocolate. Again, bourbony, vanilla, almost fresh vanilla pod. Well, yeah, fresh vanilla pod, dried fruits. Oh, damn, that's good. That is really, really impressive. Again, yes, there's a lot of oak. No getting away from that. But I mean, if you love American whiskies, you would love this. It's like a lighter bourbon version. American whiskey, I guess. Again, it's got that sort of crispness, that elegance, with lots and lots of vanilla, lots and lots of dark wood character. The finish, it lingers and lingers and lingers. Just still lots and lots of wood notes. Damn good.
Don't kneel down, just give your tears.
And finally, we're on to the 48-year-old. Let's see how 2 years has, see what difference it has made. Now that's more classically old grain. There's a little bit of chocolatey oak in the background, but it's all about the kind of cognac-esque dried fruits. Apricot, raisin, a little bit sun-dried raisin with that sweetness coming through. Some apple. Oh, that's complex. Balanced, just very, very nicely balanced. A little bit of dark toffee, some treacle, chocolate. Really getting chocolatey now. I'm getting that almost kind of dried cocoa powder chocolatiness. Some dark dried fruits, prunes possibly, but not quite as dark as you would expect with sherry. Lovely soft vanillas, lovely oak. Stunning balance. Absolutely gorgeous cask. Power. Oh, that's good. That's got a lovely, soft, sweet spice finish. A little bit of bitter chocolate, a little bit of tannin. Again, lots of that lovely cognac-y kind of dried fruit. Yes, we know these are not going to be cheap. These are three figures. I mean, you know, 40-odd-year-old grain whiskey is going to cost you the best part of what, 200-odd quid. But when you think about it, 48-year-old grain whiskey at 200-odd quid, a 48-year-old malt whiskey, depending upon obviously the distillery, you can stick another zero on the end of it. So I still think that these have just amazing value for money. I mean, you know, where are you going to get a spirit of that kind of age, that kind of level of complexity for such a little amount of money? Oh, it's just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, and of course, I'd use the term cognac-y kind of character, and of course it's essentially how cognac ages. It spends so long in the cask, it oxidises, it sort of works with the air, and you get these wonderful dried fruits, but you don't get that crispness, that slight herbalness, that sharpness sometimes that kind of balances it all up. I mean, I can still taste this now. I mean, this is just a magical combination of spirit, thyme and oak. Oh, wish I had some more of it. Okay, so let's sum up the first episode of the new year. Great episode, I think. Really, really enjoyed this. I don't get to do this very often, apart from with you guys. Looking at a range of bottlings of a distillery or what have you. Normally I'm tasting them at the time I get the samples, and I go, yeah, that's great whiskey, and you kind of keep a mental log. But when you've tasted as many whiskies as I have, you sometimes you miss things. I suppose you forget things. I mean, I've probably forgotten more things than I've. Anyway, but coming back to this is just a great showing of Invergordon. I mean, the 21-year-old. I mean, just it's classic young grain whiskey. It's got a lovely crispness, and it also has a little bit of oak. Not a great deal of dried fruit character, but that's not what we were expecting. Same could be basically said for the two 25-year-olds. Again, they're quite young, but they're starting to show some of that kind of dried fruit character that you would associate with grain whiskies. The 26-year-old, the Denny Invergordon, I just think that's probably was going through a little bit of an odd phase at that point in time. I think if I'd have tasted it, maybe it tasted better than what it did now. This is always the thing with hanging on to just small amounts of samples. They do, they can change. But I think given today's tasting, I would have elected to just leave that cask for another decade or so, because it would have ended up like these. I think pretty much. I mean, the 46-year-old again, lovely maturity, balanced, big Bourbon-y character, and it just goes to show how grain whiskies can pick up the wood character and really hang on to it throughout all those years. And obviously the 48-year-old, which was just star of the show, not because it was the oldest, but because it just showed a classic grain whiskey, or to me a classic grain whiskey. Not too much oak, balanced oak, lots and lots of dried fruit, lots and lots of oxidation character, and I can still taste it now. I mean, it was just absolutely stunning. So there you have it. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. Don't know what I'll be doing next week. I'll probably figure that out nearer the time. But I don't appear to have anything left in my glasses. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the holiday, if you're still on holiday, that is. And I'll see you next week then.